Bueno, pues buenos días a todo el mundo. Very welcome, everybody. Ayer ya empezamos, perdón, voy a hablar en castellano para no confundir a las traductoras, porque si no, mi lengua es el castellano. Eh, Ayer ya tuvimos un primer encuentro con los presenciales, pero ahora pues más para las 150 personas que nos están escuchando online. Y los que llegasteis más tarde o esta mañana, de nuevo, bienvenidos, bienvenidas a este segundo simposio intercontinental. Después diremos por qué lo llamamos intercontinental, sobre ejercicios espirituales bajo el título y la orientación de la conversión ecológica. Antes de nada, vamos a dejar la palabra a nuestro padre provincial de España, Enric Puiggrós, que está en algún lugar de España eh, esperándonos y aparecerá por aquí para escuchar lo que nos quiere decir.
Buenos días. Casualmente hoy estoy en Madrid, pero casi nunca estoy en mi oficina, pero trabajo, ¿eh? Muchas gracias y también para mí es un placer poder estar con ustedes y darles la bienvenida a este segundo simposio intercontinental de ejercicios espirituales, el cual ha sido convocado bajo el lema Ejercicios espirituales y conversión ecológica. Me complace saludarles en el comienzo de este evento, el cual se gestó hace 2 años, cuando aquí mismo y por fechas semejantes se celebró el primer simposio intercontinental con el título Mistagogías de los ejercicios 500 años después. En ese encuentro yo tuve el placer de venir presencialmente. Ahora me sabe mal solo poder compartir con ustedes por el canal online. Como fruto de ese primer encuentro se vio la necesidad de establecer un ritmo periódico de asambleas de este tipo. Y el simposio que ahora iniciamos es fruto de aquel sentir común. Como provincial del territorio español donde se halla ubicada Manresa, no puedo sino alegrarme de que esta iniciativa se haya asumido desde el equipo de la Cova de San Ignasi, así como que se haya constituido también un comité coordinador intercontinental que velará para que el contenido de las ponencias pueda reproducirse a pequeña escala en simposios locales. No hace falta decir que el tema elegido para este segundo simposio es de una importancia radical, además de ser una de las 4 preferencias apostólicas universales de la Compañía de Jesús. Hacerlo en clave de ejercicios hará que tanto los ejercicios como la cuestión ecológica se fecunden mutuamente. Hay mucho todavía que explorar en este campo. Mucho a lo que todavía nos hemos de convertir para vivir una ecología integral que refleje nuestro respeto por la madre tierra y nuestro compromiso por los que sufren en su propia carne el expolio de sus entornos vitales, y descubrir que está en juego fomentar una experiencia espiritual integral. Ustedes van a tener el privilegio y la responsabilidad de profundizar en todo ello, acompañados por expertos mundiales sobre el tema dentro de la familia ignaciana, en un clima de reflexión y de oración que propicia este lugar donde estuvo San Ignacio, viviendo austeramente al abrigo de esta cueva. Deseo que este lugar, acompañado por la silueta de la montaña de Montserrat, la figura despojada del peregrino y la cualidad de los participantes, hagan de estos días un evento tan significativo como lo fue hace 2 años, y que las reflexiones que surjan puedan servir de referencia en los años que vienen, tanto por lo que se refiere al modo de dar los ejercicios como también en el estilo de nuestros centros de espiritualidad y casas de ejercicios. Que tengáis un bonito simposio. Muchas gracias.
Doncs, moltes gràcies, Enric. Gracias por
Gracias.
hacerte presente.
Gracias.
Y como esto queda grabado, pues en algún tu tiempo libre puedes recurrir a ello. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Bien. Bueno, pues antes de todo, presentar quiénes estamos en la mesa y luego han habido dos comités, sobre todo en la gestación de este simposio. Uno es el comité, digamos, ejecutivo, representado por Luis Pagés, que es el codirector de la casa y gestor y gerente de la casa y también del simposio. O sea que muchas gracias, Luis, para toda la feina feta. También toda la cuestión online, y que es un gran trabajo que ahora mencionaremos. Y Laura Rius, que es la coordinadora de la Escuela Ignaciana de Espiritualidad, que en la plataforma apostólica de Cataluña vela por la tradición ignaciana y tiene dos sedes, en Barcelona y aquí en Manresa. Pues gracias también por todo lo que ha comportado todos estos días y los que vamos a estar aquí compartiendo. Esto ha sido, digamos, el equipo ejecutivo. Pero ha habido otro equipo que hace más de un año nos empezamos a reunir, que ha sido el equipo asesor de contenidos representado, y les pediría que se levantaran, que es Xavier de Bénazé, Fabian Moos y Martin Foen, tres compañeros. Martin, no te ves. Don't sit yet. So, muchas gracias por todo el acompañamiento de este año. Gracias a vuestro conocimiento hemos podido ponernos en relación con gente que conocíais y que yo personalmente no conocía, y creo que el resultado tanto de la gestación del simposio como del desarrollo de estos días pues debe mucho a vuestra aportación. Muchas gracias. Bien. Se ha mencionado, y esto es importante, que nuestro deseo sería ritmar cada 2 años, anualmente, estos encuentros de ejercicios. De resultas de las ponencias del año pasado, de hace 2 años, se han publicado, tenemos ya publicadas las actas de los ejercicios de 2 años. Hemos cambiado el título era Mistagogías, lo hemos cambiado por Actualidad de los ejercicios 500 años después. Está solo en castellano, lo siento. Si hay alguna algún editor inglés que se anima, aquí lo tiene, pero lo tenemos solo en castellano, disponible en la tienda del santuario. Aquí dejo dos ejemplares para que podáis hojearlos, pero adquirirlos es en la tienda de la cueva, en el santuario, a vuestra disposición a horas normales. Bueno, por lo tanto, esto es un estímulo para las ponencias de este año, de manera que también nuestro deseo es que se puedan publicar en los años que vienen y así ir creando una colección de reflexión sobre los ejercicios en sus diferentes aspectos y dimensiones. Pues gracias también a Comunicación Loyola, a todos los que han participado en la edición de un libro que es siempre larga y costosa. Cuando decimos encuentro o simposio intercontinental, estamos diciendo algo con lo que nos quisiéramos comprometer de algún modo. Entendemos que pocas personas tienen la ocasión económica y de tiempo para venir a Manresa cada 2 años. No tiene sentido que sea el único lugar. Sin embargo, lo que sí que podemos hacer desde Manresa es convocar a diferentes ponentes y hacer un encuentro presencial para los que puedan venir, pero que esto pueda multiplicarse en los múltiples centros de espiritualidad y casas de ejercicios que hay por el mundo. Y no es difícil, porque el material estará grabado. En estos momentos, ahora mismo en Sydney o Melbourne, Melbourne o Sydney. No, Sydney. Están siguiendo al mismo tiempo, bueno, en horario desfasado, porque ya todo empieza unas horas antes, pero están siguiendo el simposio y están haciendo un mini simposio en el centro de espiritualidad que hay en Sydney. Otros miembros del equipo incontinental se han comprometido a que posteriormente, en los meses que vengan, puedan hacer también un mini simposio local, porque es fácil relativamente, el material está aquí. Y es cuestión de organizar luego un clima donde permita reflexionar, compartir y llegar a unos puntos comunes, que es lo que haremos nosotros en estos días en Manresa. Pero la idea es que sea global en cuanto que estamos aquí muchos, pero que pueda también ser local en los diferentes sitios, que no cuesta demasiado hacerlo. Esto es algo que quisiéramos a lo largo de los años que vienen irlo consolidando un poco más y animando a los bastantes presentes que sois de este comité intercontinental a, cuando vayáis a vuestros sitios, a llevarlo a cabo. Pues es un deseo compartido, pues adelante con el deseo ignaciano. Bien, pues esto respecto al... Bien, como ayer dijimos, hemos ido viendo que el contenido y el modo de recibirlo es muy importante. Entonces, la concepción de la semana está hecha en torno de las 4 semanas. Hoy, cuando hagan las presentaciones, digamos, es la apertura del principio y fundamento, digamos, como el gran marco en el que nos vamos a mover a lo largo de estos días. Y luego, cada día camina una semana. Por lo tanto, ponencias por la mañana y por la tarde una hora de reflexión personal, una hora de compartir en pequeños grupos. Esto lo explicaremos al final de la mañana, pero os lo anuncio ya para que... Y luego una asamblea donde podamos escuchar de nuevo y hacer una sedimentación, un reflectir de lo que se ha ido recorriendo a lo largo de cada día. Esto es el modo de proceder con la Eucaristía final, donde en esta Eucaristía final también podemos expresar las diferentes modalidades de esta vínculo con la tierra, con Dios y con la comunidad. Ahí también hay la creatividad de los diferentes modos de celebrar la Eucaristía. Bien, por lo tanto, nos vamos a mover en este ritmo, ¿no? Tenemos un poco ahora, como Luis nos va a explicar un poco quiénes somos rápidamente, el grupo que formamos y también las conexiones online que nos están siguiendo en estos momentos.
Bueno, bienvenidos a todos y también a los de online. Están lejos, pero muy cerca. Mirad, somos 75 personas de 33 países y, bueno, es la segunda vez que iniciamos el simposio en Manresa. Vamos a separar un poco por orígenes, órdenes religiosas, géneros, idiomas. Un 51% hablan español, un 49% inglés. Un 21% son laicos, 68 jesuitas, 11 religiosos, religiosas. Países de origen, por continentes, Latinoamérica, hay de 8 países, Oceanía 1, Norteamérica 2, Europa 13, África 6, Asia 3. Por género, 28% mujeres y 72 hombres. Bueno, decía San Ignacio que el bien cuanto más universal, más divino, ¿no? Entonces, aquí estamos, de 33 países. Sobre todo a los que se han conectado online, cualquier incidencia, por favor, que escriban al email que he recibido, ¿vale? Y los intentaremos solventarles lo antes posible. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Bien, pues yo creo que por nuestra parte podemos dar ya paso a Xavier y será Laura quien presentará. Y lo de los grupos lo explicaremos un poco con más calma al final del día. Cómo proceder lo dejamos para el final de la mañana. Muchas gracias.
Bien, pues la ponencia inicial, que corre a cargo de Xavier de Bénazé, tiene por título La interconectividad de toda la creación. Cruzar las 6 puertas. Xavier de Bénazé es un sacerdote jesuita, agroingeniero y ecoteólogo. Es el delegado de la Laudato Si para su provincia de Francia y coordinador del Centro Ecoespiritual Le Châtelard. Él es también fundador del Campus de la Transición, un pueblo ecológico y ecocampo. Es francés, creció entre Marsella, ciudad portuaria del Mediterráneo, y Couffet, un pequeño pueblo al oeste de Francia. Estos 2 ecosistemas han sido los aliados de Dios que lo han enraizado en profundas convicciones. De Couffet ha aprendido el amor a las criaturas, la vida en el campo y el sentido de la historia. De Marsella ha recibido el deseo de ir más allá del horizonte y la voluntad de ir al encuentro de otras culturas. Gracias, Xavier, por tu presencia aquí. Y bueno, estamos deseosos de escuchar tu mensaje.
Muchas gracias. Va a ser un poquito difícil estar entre el inglés y el español. And I think I said I was speaking English. So let's go for English. I'll start by offering you a little exercise. So you need to be with another person. So you need to be 2 by 2. So find your neighbor. Is it okay? You have the neighbor for the exercise. Okay, so between you, choose who is A and who is B. Choose a letter, A or B. So that was the easy instruction. Now I'll start a sentence and then A will have to finish the sentence with 1 minute and then it will go silent. And then B will complete the same sentence with 1 minute. So the sentence is written here, a place where I feel in deep communion with creation is a place where I feel in deep communion with creation is. And now A can speak for 1 minute. Okay, now we can go back to silence. And now it's B that will speak for 1 minute. A place where I feel in deep communion with creation is B can speak. Okay. So we can come back. I wanted to start with this little exercise because I think that's an experience maybe of this idea of interconnectivity, of interdependence, and that during these next 5 days we will be speaking together, thinking a lot, praying a lot maybe, and it may be at some point difficult because the situation we are going to evoke is not good, and news are not good in many ways in this field. So we need to connect with the deep life and the deep flow of the spirit within us. If not, we may be falling in despair, or we may think we must avoid these questions. So the place you've evoked now this morning may be a good place to come back in the coming days, maybe in prayer, maybe in a moment of silence. It's a place where God is finding you and you can find God. And these are very useful routes when we want to look at the world as it is today without falling in despair. Now, the presentation this morning will be in 2 parts. And as it is the first lecture, the idea is to give a general framework first, and it will be the integral ecology that Pope Francis is offering us in Laudato Si. Many of you have worked on this text, so this will be one, let's say, one definition, one framework. There are others, of course. And then the second part will be a kind of example of integral ecology, of connecting things together. Everything is interconnected. And it will be through the experience of Campus de la Transition, where Fabian and myself have worked. It's a lay place, but a good example of interconnection. I'll come back to it later. Now, starting with integral ecology and starting by defining integral ecology, underlining its relational paradigm, is, I think, a useful compass for our 5 days. What we are going to explore, connections between Ignatian spirituality and eco-spirituality, is really, I mean, a new field. There are some things already down, but it's really a new field. So we may evoke many things, many different things. We may open many gates. We may want to explore many tracks. And so at one point, between all these different things that are not settled yet, we may get a bit lost. And I think integral ecology and its 4 fundamental relationships can be a good compass to come back to. if we get a bit lost between all the ideas, good ideas that are going to be evoked in these rooms and in our conversations in the coming days. So what is this compass? I suggest that we can keep in mind that integral ecology is an invitation by Pope Francis based on the gospel, the Bible, and Christian anthropology, that our life are woven by four main relationships. Relationships with myself, relationship with other humans, relationship with creation, and relationship with God. And integral ecology is an invitation to change our world vision, and I'm going to offer you some exercises for this, to change our world vision, to look at the world around us as woven, as creating, as alive by these four main relationships. Of course, in these four main relationships, they are not equal, in the sense that for us, in the Christian context, the relationship with God is the root, is the starting point, is what maintains, and it was called at the end, all the other three relationships. So you may remember the title of the exercises, the complete one, that is to ordain our life to choose without bad attachment or something like that. So the spiritual exercises are offering us a school to first reordain our life to God, and then be able to choose in the three other areas of relationships without bad attachments, with freedom. But the first step is to come back to God and to reordain our life in relationship with God. So you see, that's already something I think where the spiritual exercises can help us to dive really in integral ecology. Now, integral ecology implies, as Pope Francis says, implies an ecological conversion, in the sense that it implies that our relationship with God, our following of Christ, will actually change things in the other three relationships, with myself, with the other humans, and with creation. And in a way, the conversion, what is at stake, is to change our world vision. I'll come back later to the two graphs, but you have on the left part the donut economy vision of the world of Kate Raworth. She's an economist, an English economist, and she has crossed the state of our world in terms of ecology with what we have reached or not reached in terms of social level. And you see it's on the outside of the cycle. We have overshoot the ecological ceiling of 6 of the 9 ecological boundaries. Here it's only 4, but in 2023 it was actualized, and we have overshoot 4 of the 9 ecological boundaries that constitute the ecological ceiling of our common home. But at the same time, at international level, at planet level, we have not reached the social foundation for a dignified human life for everybody. We are far away from a good social foundation for everybody on this planet. And that's points a good question for us after, let's say, 200 or 300 years of so-called progress. For the last 200 or 300 years, at least the Western world, and today most of the countries are running after what we have called progress. And progress was defined by reaching the social foundation. We were going out of the dark ages, and we will give a good life to everybody by giving mainly material conditions for a good life for everybody. And in a way, this promise has been accomplished. A good part of us in this room are here because of the modern way of medical science. And medical science has been developed under this paradigm of progress, of technocratic paradigm, and it has given good fruits. So I'm not throwing away all the good things we have received from the two last centuries, but we see that this technocratic paradigm, this way of looking at the world as a machine, has come to limits, not only one, but to limits. And the fruit of it have been mainly for rich people and people mostly from the Western world. So we can feel with this state of the world that we are reaching a real limit of this way of looking at the world and seeing so-called development. So what the Pope is asking us, offering us, to say, well, we can say we have looked at the world like Charlie Chaplin in the modern times. We have looked at the world as a machine, and we have taken a reductionist approach. So we've said, well, this is a big machine, let's divide it in little parts, and then more and more little parts, and then we can understand how it works, and then we can control it, at least part of it, what was interesting for us to reach social foundation. So now that we have looked at the world as a machine for 200 or 300 years, we must switch to this relational paradigm. We must switch to a way of looking at the world as an organic tissue woven by the four main relationships I've mentioned before. And so we must go to the right part of the picture. And we must try to build this world, so the common home where we respect the ecological ceiling and we can offer good social foundation for everybody on this planet. So that may be the big switch, the real conversion we must enter into. And in this framework, I think a good question, or good questions for us during these days is how the spiritual exercises can be a school for this ecological conversion, and how the spiritual exercises can help us to care for these four relationships. A little exercise. You have 6 pictures on the screen. I will let you 1 minute to put them in order and try to look at the world with the machine lens, with the machine paradigm. What's the order? What's the story of these 6 pictures? You have 1 minute to think about it. So there may be different orders, but you could say that us humans have discovered oil. First picture, left corner. And with the machine paradigm, we have looked at oil and divided in molecules. We have been able to analyze it and say, oh, there are different parts in this black thing. And so we've used techniques, and that's the second picture, a raffinery, to divide oil into these different molecules. And then we have been able to take these basic molecules, so we have analyzed the machine in little parts, and then we are building a world using these different little parts. So we have taken different molecules from crude oil to constitute, among other things, plastics. And so we've been able to build a very convenient things called plastics, and here plastic bottles. And to be honest, it is really convenient. I mean, look at the chairs you are sitting in. They are in plastics. It's light, it's quite strong, it resists transport. So in a way, all these three first pictures with the with the machine lens gives you a very good fruit. And we are happy to have good chairs today. Yet, what we were not able at the time to understand, even within the machine lens, is that plastic will end in good part in our oceans. And in our oceans, our plastic bottles will come back to other little parts. They will be divided in little and little parts and become microplastics. So apart from the plastic continent in the Pacific Ocean, the main problem is that we will create new little parts called microplastics. And these microplastics will end in this fish, for example, but not only in this fish, it will end in our human blood. So today, the same machine lens analyzing the blood of pregnant mothers or the blood of babies is able to say, in the blood of a newborn baby, today you have microplastics. And this is not a natural molecule. So the same machine lens looking at little part that has authorized us to build magnific, beautiful plastic bottles is telling us today, guys, we have a problem. We find little parts of what is called microplastics in our food and in our blood. And so you see that staying in the machine lens, staying in the machine paradigm, we can see the problems. But if we stay in the machine paradigm, we'll say, well, let's try a new kind of plastic. Let's try to build organic plastic that will be able to destroy itself in the sea, etc., etc. But in this way, we are not going out of the problem. We will stay in the same paradigm. And we may create organic plastic, but then we'll realize that for this, we need to take plants that were used for human food or animal food to transform it in plastic. So we may push people to starve to build the new things we need. So that's where we must see that things are interconnected and that we must go out of the machine paradigm and enter a relational paradigm and ask ourselves, okay, what is plastic giving us as a relationship? How does it care or not for the four main relationships I mentioned before? And maybe in the name of these relationships, we may be able to stop using plastics. Maybe, for example, like in many countries today, to forbid the use of plastic bags, to forbid the use of single-use plastics. But we will do it in the name of taking care of these 4 relationships. We'll be able to go out of the problem by adapting a new lens, a new world vision. So this idea of entering a new world vision may be beautiful, but you may think it's a bit far away from reality. I'm taking 3 examples, or maybe 2, we'll see with the time. So what do you see on the left, the first image on the left part of the screen? What is this animal? A cow. Okay, a buffalo. Okay. A zebu. Yep. So, who has seen a living cow or buffalo or zebu in the last 24 hours? Who has portrayed who has seen a living cow in the past week? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey. Who has seen a living, who has eaten beef in the last 24 hours? 1, 2, 3 maybe. Who has eaten beef during the past week? Okay, so perhaps 50 people. So during the past week, 50 of us have been in relationship with this cow under the form of a steak, of a T-bone maybe. And only 6 of us have seen a living cow. I didn't even ask if we've touched a living cow. And that's normal for us today in this part of the world. It's normal to be firstly in a relationship with a cow under the form of meat and to eat it. If you were in India, where this cow has been taken in photo, a good part of the population in India will not have in mind to be in a relationship with a cow under the form of meat, because their vision of the world, being formed by their religion, is saying that you see this as a sacred animal. Having conversations with Indian Jesuits, you may see it as a big problem because it's in the middle of the road and you can't take it out and you'll be late to your next meeting. So you may not see it only as a sacred animal, but for a good part of people living in India, you don't even think about this being your steak in your plate. And so you see that the way the world vision here applied to a cow, the world vision that is coming from a religion, so from a deep part of your brain and your living being, is changing the way you are in a relationship with an animal. So a world vision may seem a bit far away from reality, but it impacts a lot our way of being in a relationship in reality. I switch to the last picture. Time is flying. What do you see on the right part of this image? A woman from a tribe, native. So some people among us know better than myself this kind of people. So she is a woman from the Guarani tribe. So somewhere around Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil. If you've seen the Mission movie with Jeremy Irons and who else? Robert De Niro, maybe. So this film is happening in this part of the world. And so today, I hope so, everybody in this room didn't even ask himself or herself if this was a human being. It was obvious that this was a human being. 500 years ago, good European Christian people arrived in this part of the world and asked themselves, is she a human being? Part of it was for economical reasons, for racist reasons, etc., etc. But part of it was coming for a deep world vision formed by Christianity and Christianity in dialogue with the Greek philosophy. And the question was, does this has a soul or not? If it has not a soul, then it's not a human being, then it is an animal, and then you can do whatever you want with this creature. If it has a soul, then it is a human being, then you should not enslave these people. You can't do whatever you want with another human being. And you know that this has been a debate. It has been, the Pope has said, these are human people, but still there were debates. So we had here in this country, in Spain, in Valladolid, a big scientific meeting of that time to debate if Amerindians had souls or not. It's just to say that, you see, the world vision can also change the way we are in relationships, even with human beings. And you don't have to go back so late in time, 500 years ago, to see that some people would like to define other human beings are not really human beings. Things of Russia and all this rhetoric saying that people from Ukraine are neo-Nazi. That's long month before the invasion to say, well, they are not really humans, you know. If they are Nazis, it's not really humans. So you're authorized to do things that you should not do to other human beings. So it can be in a relationship with other creatures. It can be in a relationship with other humans. It can be in a relationship with myself. My world vision, my deep way of looking at the world changes, even unconsciously, the way I interact and I am in a relationship with other beings on this earth. And so when we say that we will try to switch from a machine paradigm to a relational paradigm, this may sound a bit theoretic, but it will have deep impacts in our daily life and the way we interact with other beings. No, and that will be the last slide for this part. To walk into this ecological conversion, as Christian, we need to be in dialogue with other cultures. Sorry, the title is in French. And the thing is that Pope Francis is inviting us in Laudato Si to enter into this dialogue. In particular, in chapter 5, he's offering a series of dialogue we should have at international, national, local, family level. But what is really interesting is that the Pope is not only inviting us to adapt dialogue as a method for ecological conversion, is actually applying this invitation to himself in the way he writes the encyclical. So it takes the see, judge, act method, that is the classical method for this to develop the social teaching of the church, but he also at each step build a dialogue between the world, chapter 1, 3, 5, and the Christian tradition and the Bible, chapter 2, 4, 6. And so I think that can be a deep source of inspiration for us and a lesson. We are not going to walk this ecological conversion path by ourselves, only Christian, saying, okay, we have the Bible and we have Laudato Si, this is the little green book, and we know everything. We will have to be in dialogue with others. And that's an interesting question for us. How can the spiritual exercises be in dialogue with others and with people that may have other faiths or who do not believe in God? Now, I'm switching to the second part to give you a little example of what this kind of change of world vision and dialogue can give in a lay context. So this lay context is the campus de la transition. So the campus de la transition is works at 3 scales. It is let's say an eco village. So you have the 2 pictures. It's in this castle is beautiful, but it's an old castle. And when we arrived in 2018, it has been empty for 2 years. So it was not really in a good shape. So it's an actual place where you have, and that's the picture on the left corner, bottom left corner, where you have people living and trying to live a simple and happy way of life that could be defined as a way of living that is inside the donut limits, that respect the ecological ceiling and the social foundation. So it's an actual experience. People are living, and at least trying to live, this way of life. Eco-village, first scale. But the idea of this eco-village is not to be for itself. It's to serve others, to reach others, to touch others, and mostly people from the world of the universities, the academics. And so it's also an eco-campus, and that's the picture here, where we receive group of students and group of professors who come for 3 days, from 3 days to 1 month, to receive immersion courses in our place. We are not a university. We are in partnership with universities. They send the students and the professors, but they send them to our place because people come and they are really happy to have a good head content, a good academic content, but also because this is an immersion experience, so it implies their body. When they go out of class, they may help in the vegetable garden, in the kitchen, some work to do. They may go out for a little promenade in the woods. And that's what they really appreciate because it's coherent with what they've been taught. And they may start to be moved more deeply, to touch their heart. So that's what we call the pedagogy of head, body, heart, mind, body, heart. And I think the spiritual exercises are a kind of pedagogy of mind, body, and heart. So there are places for dialogue here. And the last scale, so the eco-village, the eco-campus, that's the last picture, is, let's call it the eco-network. If we do a very good eco-place and eco-campus, we started in 2018, 10 years later, in 2028, if we teach and form 1,000 people per year, that would be amazing. Yet, it's not enough for the change we need. So the idea is not to stay in our little world, is to be connected, is to be in a relational mode. And so it's to share what we learn with other, it can be university network, it can be other eco-villages. So the 3 scales. And inside this experience at one point, we were approached by the Minister for Higher Education in France, asking us to build a kind of basic knowledge for people during the 3 first year of universities in their bachelor. One, what should they know, but not only intellectual knowledge, but way of beings, way of looking at the world. And we've done something a bit amazing. We've put together 70 professors from different disciplines, some students and some people coming from the professional world, from companies, say, okay, what should we answer to the minister? And that gave this route, this 6 gates approach. So I'm going to develop a bit each gate with some examples, but I will start by an exercise, another exercise. So you have the 6 gates in front of you. One, oikos, is, let's say, hard science, physics, mathematics, biology. Okay, oikos, science. Ethos is all what deals with ethics, philosophy, what is a good life today in this world. Nomos is the way we measure and we regulate this world, and particularly human societies. So it's economy, it's law, it's governance science. Logos is art, narratives. What kind of narrative, what kind of stories do we share in this age of Anthropocene? Praxis is the way we should act ourselves all together when we face the ecological and social crisis. And dynamis, remember, this is a lay context and it's a French lay context, so speaking of spirituality is very difficult, but they all agreed that this was one of the main gates of ecological and social transition. The inner life, the openness to something bigger, the reconnection to nature, oneself, and the other humans. So God is not here, okay, but you see that this relational way of looking at the world is shared at least for 3 of the main relationships. So you have the 6 gates in front of you. And I will ask you, what is the gate you spontaneously use to look at the ecological and social crisis? Do you look it first with science, with spirituality, with ethics, with narratives, with economy? What's your first entrance door? Who is entering by science? You can vote only once. Okay, maybe 10 people. Who is entering first by economy and law? Okay, 5. Who is entering first by ethics? Okay. Who is entering first by the logos, the art, the narratives? Okay. Who is entering first by the praxis, the action, collective and individual? 2, 3, 4. And who is entering first by the spiritual gate, the dynamis gate? 5, 6. Could have seen more in this kind of symposium. Okay. So my point here is to say that two things. First, this methodology can be entered into by any door. And the invitation after that, once you know your spontaneous starting point, is to move to the other gates. And maybe first to move to the gates, you don't even think of saying, well, I don't see how art and narratives and the logos door, what is it about? What does art has to tell us in this social and ecological crisis? I don't see the point. Well, that may be an invitation for explorations. One, at individual level. Then at collective level, you see that in our group, we had people entering by all of the 6 gates, at least at an entrance gate. And so that's a good lesson for our communities, Jesuit communities, Christian communities, in that the other people in the room may not enter first by my gate. And I've learned it the hard way with some Jesuits. I've done agroengineering studies first, so I tend to enter quite easily by the oikos door, by the science door. And I've learned that with some Jesuits, I can give them figures and evidences of the crisis. This does not work at all. At one point, it's even the reverse. They don't want to listen anymore. But some may enter more easily by the spiritual door. And I think this is a big lesson for me in the province. We'll speak of it later during the symposium, in that, for example, in the Jesuit world, for most of the Jesuits, if you're not able to say something around the spiritual gate, then they may not join the movement. So it's good to be cautious and be attentive. Where is the other entrance door for the people with me, if we have to build this world together? Now, I think I'm out of time. I can go. Okay, you'll tell me when I'm out of time. I will just open very quickly the different gates to give you a bit more of content, some ideas for exploration. So the oikos door, I will focus on this and the next one. Quarter of an hour, oh great. So, quarter of an hour. A way to describe what the scientists have described the period we are in is to say we are experiencing a great acceleration. So all these graphs, I'm not going to comment them, but in terms of social and ecological, let's say, development, this is showing you that the development of our human societies have been going up and up very quickly on these different parameters. And this development has very huge and accelerated impact on the Earth systems. So this has been called by scientists the Great Acceleration, to the point that we can speak today of the Anthropocene, so the age of humans. I've done agroengineering studies, and I'm always a bit amazed by this world. And I like this world because it said the ecological and social crisis in one word, Anthropocene, efficient. And so it's a bit crazy to say, and it's scientists saying, we human beings are now the main geological force. We change the world more than volcanoes, rivers, oceans, etc. So, for example, we move sand every year. The volume of sand we move is twice the volume of sand that is moved by all the big rivers of the world, because we need sand to build houses and all these kind of things. So this is only one example to tell you how much we are able to impact this Earth at geological level. This is totally crazy in terms of power, and it's totally crazy in terms of time. We are doing it during the last 60 years. Normally, geological times are over hundreds of thousands of years at least. Here, 60 years. It's totally crazy, but it tells you what is at stake. And this is the better graph to say the state of the world in terms of science. It's called the planet boundaries. It's from the Stockholm Resilience Center. And they have identified the 9, so I was telling you before, the 9 ecological boundaries of our planet, of the Earth system. And for each of these boundary, they have estimated the place where we are going out of the actual balance over the last 10,000 years. So the Holocene geological era, where we humans have developed all the big civilizations we know. And so you see that for most of the boundaries, we are overshooting the limit. We are changing the planet balance. So this is the good picture to have in mind in terms of describing the state of the planet, or at least, I mean, this is the best I know. And remember, we are in this everything is interconnected vision of the world. And so, of course, the different boundaries are linked together. If climate change increases and you transform a forest into a desert, then of course it has impact on the biodiversity and water resources. So the boundaries are connected together. Now, if I switch to nomos, we tend to measure the development of our countries by their GDP, their economical development. And that's all. Well, for the last at least 20, 30 years, there have been a lot of people working saying this is not enough, of course. And we see that at the beginning, when the GDP of a country is growing, the happiness of people is growing. But at one point, it's not correlated anymore. The GDP is growing and the happiness of people is staying at the same level. So of course, GDP can't be the only, it can be part of, but it can't be the only way we measure development. Yet, we keep going with GDP as the measure of development. Whereas some institutions like the OCDE, what's the word in English, the group of the 20 more developed countries, so it's not kind of anarchist movement, have developed something like the Better Life Index. So you see, you can go on the website of the Better Life Index, you choose to give different weight to different parameters of development, and then it gives you different levels for the different countries of this OCDE group. And it even gives you the estimation for big regions inside these 20 countries. So I took Catalonia, we are in Catalonia, and see that Catalonia, in terms of development, but multi-parameters, is close to, at least what they say, to Hauts-de-France in France, to Liguria in Italy, to Bremen in Germany, etc., etc. So, at least for Jesuits, the next time the Provincial may offer you a new mission, you may want to look at what's happening. And maybe you can say, well, if I have to be sent, I'd prefer, at least from French point of view, I'd prefer to be in Catalonia than Hauts-de-France. So that's for a bit of economy. Something very interesting is happening at low level and in terms of legal process and judgment. In Europe, in 2015, in Uganda, so that was in Netherlands, an NGO from this country has suited its own government, saying you don't do enough in terms of fighting climate change, and they've won. So a justice court from this country, by petition of a local NGO, has been condemning the state of the Netherlands to act. This has given ideas to a lot of people. For example, in France, in the middle, where we've done the same thing. And again, in the Netherlands, this time, not against a government, but against a private company, Shell, the British Netherlands oil company. And this is, for example, a huge leverage point for change, at least in the private world. A lot of companies are afraid of this kind of thing. And so this may push them to change more than a nice integral ecology discourse or demonstrations in the streets. The fact that you can be condemned and that you have to pay is an obvious encouragement to change. So law can be a good place. Ethos, 2 comments. The question of ethics, the basic one is, what is a good life? Well, I don't know what's a good life, or I may have ideas, but for sure, you may have other ones. We all need to be inside this common home. If there are holes in the ceiling or holes in the floor, it's a problem for all of us. So a good life, you have to invent it inside this framework. And in a way, integral ecology is Pope Francis offering a Christian answer of what a good life is inside this common home in a good shape. In ethics, it's interesting to see that inside this framework, we have a comeback of the ethical approach of virtues. And people are reinventing or renewing the virtue approach by developing ecological virtues, hope, humility, courage, resilience. You can invent many of them, but inside the big ethical models, the ecological and social crisis is bringing up a renewal of the virtue approach. And that's interesting because, for example, the spiritual exercises and the cultivation of virtues has been a way the Jesuits have been presenting the spiritual exercises for centuries. It may not be our first approach today, at least in France, but it has been in history. So maybe we have something to learn and to renew in our approach. Now, narratives, I'm only giving examples of some form of art. So you have novels like The Ministry of Future or the Mad Adam trilogy by Margaret Atwood. I've tried to find some international things, not only French. You have movies, and if you want to realize what it means, you look at the trailer of An Inconvenient Truth. It's 1.5 minutes, and then you look at the trailer of Tomorrow, 1.5 minutes. So it's not going to take you a lot of time. And you see it's about the same subject, but the stories they tell are totally different. And so you can look at it, look at what it is provoking in you, and then say, okay, in which story do I want to enter? What story is touching me? What story is pushing me in movement? What story is bringing me fear? So do the exercise and you will see why logos, why art, why narratives, why stories have to be part of this new world we want to invent. Now, praxis, action. Generally speaking, when we speak about action, most of the time, at least in the Western world, we will speak about carbon emissions, and we tend to speak with average figures. Average does not exist. And by using average, we tend to forget this reality. To make it short, rich people and rich countries have polluted the most in history and are still polluting the most, and they have so more responsibilities. They are not in the average. And you can't ask the same level of action to people with the biggest impact and the biggest power to change, and the same action to people who have low income, low power, and are, strangely, but that's it, the one already suffering from the ecological and the social crisis. This is the reality. And this is the carbon footprint of the EOF province, of my Jesuit province. I forgot to put one figure. In average, a Jesuit from my province is emitting 9 tons of CO2 per year. It's a bit less than the average of our 3 countries, Luxembourg, Belgium, and France. Nice. We are under the average. Yet, if we divide the population, half that emits more, half that emits less, so if I don't look at the average, but at the median, the median is around 7. So we are in the part of the population that is emitting more, half of the population that is emitting more. So when I'm telling that the richest one have the biggest responsibility, I must include at least Jesuits from my province. It's not the top rich people living in Dubai and taking planes like I'm taking the bike. It is our normal Western way of life. So I have to enter in this ecological conversion with more responsibilities than some of you guys in your countries. That's obvious. Now, I must say that at least today in the Western world and being in touch with the ecological movements, with young people, but not only young people, in terms of action, there is one question growing and growing is what about civil disobedience? And from young Christian people, I've been asked at least 3 times, what does the church say about civil disobedience? Where is the red line? What can we do and what we cannot do? So, and often the question comes like this. So as a Jesuit, when someone is asking me what can be done and what cannot be done, my first reflex is to say the question is not good in most of the areas. Yet, that's how young people come to me saying, where is the red line? Is strikes, this is a bridge in London, I think, is occupying a bridge, a correct way of action for Christians, is blocking a coal mine in Germany, a good way to act as a Christian, is more or less here, is sabotage without putting a life in danger, is sabotage okay for a Christian? These are, you see, ethical, but ethics coming from action. These are questions for Christians today. And I must say that I have some ideas for answering the question, but I don't have a clear theory on it. And speaking with Jesuits around me, the question is not so easy. And that will be the last one because that we are going to develop in the coming days. So I will stop here. All this will not be possible, I think, if it's only outside, if it's only actions, if it's only ideas. We need an inner conversion. We need to bring spiritual depth to this ecological conversion. And that's what we are going to explore in the coming days. So I'm very happy to be with you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Javier, por esta sugestiva y completa y clara exposición que seguramente nos ha cuestionado a todos. Entonces, mirad, ahora disponemos de 10 minutos para dirigirle a Javier preguntas que hagan referencia a clarificar alguna información. Los comentarios que tengamos de fondo, aquello que queramos expresar, pues si os parece lo dejamos para el final de la mañana. Al final de la mañana tendremos una mesa aquí para moderar con los ponentes y entonces le podremos hacer los comentarios o cuestionamientos que nos haya sugerido su ponencia. Ahora repito, quien lo desee, levanta la mano, le pasamos el micro y entonces le hace una pregunta para aclarar información. Gracias.
Gracias por la exposición, de verdad. De la experiencia en el campus, los que entran por las distintas puertas logran hacer el camino por las otras puertas. ¿Cuál es la dificultad y cuál es lo que ayuda?
Thanks. I would say that for people living on site, they tend to go through all of the gates with time because we are living all together. And so there are a lot of conversations going on. And as we have time, people may stay 3 weeks, 6 months, 3 years. They will have time to do the walk. For people coming, let's say, for 3 days of formation, I can't say what we hear and what we see is that mostly we tend to receive people until now coming from engineering schools, scientific universities, let's say, and from business schools. So they enter mostly by oikos or by nomos. And they certainly are very interested, and they feel the openness and the promise of this approach. Very often they are interested by the ethics, by the ethos, because that's what they experience in their life. They are dilemmas, but they have nobody to speak of these dilemmas with. After that, do they really take time after the 3 days or the week with us to continue having and making interconnection between the different gates? I don't know. The wish we have is that their universities will develop interdisciplinary courses, and it's happening. We are accompanying some universities, but it's not easy. Most of, I would say, if there is a problem, is the tendency of our formation system to work in silos, in specializations. And that may be the main obstacle, at least for the people coming in formation.
I have a question. Sorry, I have a question from the Sydney group. Was there a First Nation perspective in the campus? Ways of knowing and being in education?
In an obvious way, no. But in a way that, in the sense that we did not have First Nation people among us, but we had people's PhD students, professors who have worked with native people. For example, Xavier had worked a lot with people in the Andes mountain in South America. Emmeline was doing a PhD on African native literature and the Anthropocene. So this perspective was present, but mostly at intellectual level. In France, we don't have First Nation people. So yeah, that's maybe one perspective we miss, or we could develop more.
What was the response of the government to your plan?
A political one. So I'm just giving a bit of context. So what happened? We started the campus on site in June 2018. In November 2018, there was a big movement of students in the French universities asking for a strong reform of the way they were taught on this subject. They published a text and 30,000 students signed it from a lot of different universities in 2 months. And not only that, they organized themselves to keep putting pressure on the director of the universities. The director of the universities in the last 15 years in France have been pushed and pressed to target the Shanghai ranking system. And the Shanghai ranking system, or the Financial Times one, is about the budget for research, the number of papers you publish, and the salary you have at the end. So, of course, the 3 indicators, the 3 metrics, do not push you to govern your big boats, your big universities for the ecological transition. And so the directors were saying, we have the students putting pressure for something else, and we have the governments and public fundings and private fundings going another way. What should we do? So they go to the minister. The minister doesn't know how to answer. So they come to 1 year after we started. So it's a bit crazy. The minister of a big state like France come to a recent NGO 1 year, led by a religious sister in the lay system of France, and asking us if we could coordinate so many researchers, all lay people, and lay without religion, because we were neutral. The other NGOs were considered too leftist, too I don't know what, and the universities were divided between themselves. So they come, pick the new actor, and say, can you do the work for us? So we start working, and it's big strikes in December, it's COVID, so it's hard. Comes the end of the product, but it was 1 year later. You don't do this in 2 weeks. And so the ministers had moved to another thing. So she received the result. She said, thank you. She paid 1 year later. And that was it for the political part of it. That's a bad way to look at the story. Yet, in the meanwhile, she had asked a scientist, a French scientist from the IPCC, to start a conversation between universities. So not with this intellectual depth, but more at political level. And he and some of the guys in this meeting group were connected with us, saying, okay, you do the in-depth work, we do the political part. And this meeting has brought some results at political level and some new directions for French universities. So it's not a total failure in terms of politics. It's not a total success story.
Muchas gracias. Bien, pues ahora disponemos de media hora de descanso. Dentro de media hora, a las 12 menos cuarto, nos volveremos a encontrar aquí para la segunda ponencia y la reunión final de la mañana.